Welcome to A Biker 589. This is me reading the art book part 4. Artist profile. Artist biography by Paul Klee, 1879, born near Bern in Switzerland. 1898, at age 19 years old, moved to Munich to study at the Academy of Fine Art. 1902 to 1901 to 1902. Toured Rome, Naples, and Florence in Italy. 1911. Joined a group of artists in Germany called Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider. 1912. At age 33, visited Parks, met Delme, and was influenced by Cubism. 1920 to 1931, painted and taught at the Barbans School of Art and Design in Weimar in Germany. 1933, returned to Switzerland to escape Nazi persecution. 1940, died in Switzerland. Artist influences. Franz Marc, inspired by the use of very bold colors for expression. Wassily Kandinsky, inspired by the fresh and free way Kandinsky used color. Paul Klee, I want to be as though newborn, almost primitive. Castle and Son, 1928, 19.75 times 23.25 inches, 50 times 59 centimeters, oil on canvas. Modern art, Klee, a hugely original and now popular artist. Paul Klee was also amazingly productive. By the time he died, he had produced more than 9,000 works. His style is hard to pin down. Some of the images, the straightforward and figurative, while others are completely abstract. Assorted shapes, strongly influenced by Cubism. This abstracted portrait, Senecio, means old man, is drawn in soft colors and geometric shapes. A simple triangle suggests a disapproving raised eyebrow that reflects Klee's sharp wit. Senecio, 1922, oil on primed galls on cardboard. Cock and Pig, 1920, pen on paper. A drawing is simple, a lion going for a walk. Taking a line for a walk. This is the way Klee thought of drawing. He would start to doodle with a pencil. See what shapes appeared, and then play with what he saw like a child. Klee relied heavily on his imagination, finding endless inspiration by experimenting with colors and shapes as well as pencil lines. Painting music. Paul Klee was a talented musician, and he trained as a violinist. This passion comes through in his pictures, where he often arranges blocks of color like notes in a melody, set off with harmonizing shades. As in a musical composition, Castle and Son, although it consists only of shapes and colors, is so carefully constructed that it clearly portrays roads and buildings. Klee's main passion was for color. Color and I are one, he wrote. Now you try. Try to draw your own picture in the style of Klee. Try painting simple figures set off by lines, squares, rectangles, circles, and triangles in really bright colors. Use your box of watercolor paints. When Klee was a young painter, he always worked in watercolors. By Rebecca, age 12. Art style. Surrealism. Surreal means more than real. Surrealist painters thought that powerful feelings could be expressed through dream-like paintings where ordinary subjects were shown in impossible situations. This questioning of reality was in response to the horrors of World War I. What did it happen? In the late 1800s, there was renewed interest in the work of some 16th century artists, such as Hieronymus Bostrus and Giuseppe Arcimboldo, who had painted imaginary worlds and experimented with usual ideas. Hieronymus Boss oil paintings were visions crammed with weird creatures and disordered figures. The Garden of Earthly Delights detailed, c. 1500. Giuseppe Arcimboldo. As a Renaissance artist, Arcimboldo was ahead of his time. His detailed paintings showed flowers, fruits, and vegetables arranged as fantastic heads. Giuseppe Arcimboldo, c. 1527 to 1593. James Ensor in the late 19th century, the Belgian artist Ensor became known for his fantasy paintings featuring carnival figures and masked puppets and skeletons. Old Women with Masks, 1889. James Ensor, 1860 to 1949. Nude Descending a Staircase Number 2, 1912, by Marcel Duchamp. From 1906, color photography became available along with other developments in photograph techniques. Artists were inspired to mimic these techniques, such as images taken in quick succession. Weeping Woman, 1937. Cubist paintings showed a subject fragmented from many viewpoints, and art had become a way of expressing opinions. Cubism. From 1910 and into the 1920s, the Italian artist Criscio painted dreamlike pictures of unrelated objects in deserted places, including unidentifiable figures and strange shadows. The Anguish of Departure, 1913 to 1914. Giorgio De Chirico, 1888 to 1978. 1914 to 1918. The destruction and suffering of World War I was blamed on the upper class's control over society. While the rest of Europe was at war, Dada movement began in Switzerland, so called after a baby's first sounds. The artists protested against the foolishness of war by sticking together fragments of everyday objects to make supposedly meaningless art. Marcel Duchamp used ready-made, mass-produced objects to show the absurdity of life. Dada. Fountain, 1917, by Marcel Duchamp. 1924, the French poet and critic André Breton started the idea of surrealism, based on physiologist Sigmund Freud's work on dreams and unconscious minds. Surrealist writers wrote whatever thoughts they had as quickly as possible. The mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. Surrealist artists different ways to reveal their unconscious thoughts. Autism, Max Ernst. Massacre of the Innocents, 1921. Envis created surrealist colleges by putting together a random collection of images from catalogs, textbooks, and advertisements. This uncontrolled process was called visual autism. Andre Mason, automatic drawing. C. 1924 to 1925. Seriously wounded in World War I, Mason suffered from nightmares and fits of rage. He would spontaneously draw when he was stressed, sometimes after purposely not eating or drinking for a long time. Another direction. Man Ray. Railgraph. Greascope. Magnifying glass pen. 1922. Man Ray placed everyday objects on photographic light-sensitive paper and exposed them to light, making the objects' flat shapes and shadows appear on the paper. This was called a rayograph. Dreamlike. Salvador Dali, promotion of Civil War. Soft construction with boiled beans, 1936. Spanish artist Dali made strange dreamlike paintings by looking instantly at a set of objects until he could see others like a hallucination. Yavis Tangu, though through birds, through fire, but not through glass. 1943. On the strange ocean or moon-like landscapes, Tangu used non-geogrammic shapes to suggest living things, a method called biophism. René Magritte, The Liberator, 1947. Magritte painted familiar objects, animals, and people in screens that didn't make sense. He repeated some objects in other paintings. Artist profile, artist biography, Joan Miró, 1893, born in Barcelona, Spain. 1919, at age 26, visited Paris for the first time and continued to spend winters there until the start of the Spanish Civil War in 1936, when he settled there. 1940, returned to Spain to escape the German occupation of France, settling mainly on the island of Majorca. 1947, visited the United States for the first time to produce a mural. 1958, installed two huge centric wall decorations in the UNESCO building, Paris. 1983, died in Majorca. Artist influences, Pablo Picasso, inspired by Cubist idea of showing many viewpoints. Francis Picaboo, inspired by Dada idea of scattered and random forms. Joan Miró, the Spanish artist Joan Miró used his memory and imagination to paint his pictures. One of his happy memories was of the many Falls Spanish festivals that he had taken part in when he was young. In 1925, while in Paris, Miró painted the Carnival of the Harlequin by letting his subsequent mind make the images and method a bit like doodling. The phallus was a parade of huge, colorful puppets made from paper mache called phallus, which were then burned on the final day of the 2-week festival. In 1956, Miró moved to a house in Majorca, where he lived until his death in 1983. His studio was filled with his fantasy paintings and sculptures. Back stains of paint can still be seen on the floor. Flowing lines, curved objects, and twisted shapes were features of Miró's style. He used a handful of bright colors against the plain background. A harlequin is a clown-like figure. Can you find Bin in the painting? What do you think he is feeling? A harlequin costume is usually split into areas of contrasting primary colors. Carnival of the Harlequin, 1924 to 1925, 26 times 36.5 inches, 66 times 93 centimeters, oil on canvas. What can you see in Miró's surreal dreamlike painting called The Carnival of the Harlequin? Can you recognize animals, objects, and shapes? Why are they scattered in a room? Maybe it's Miró's mind, or perhaps a workshop. Now you try. Try drawing your own picture in the style of Miró. Think of a favorite memory, perhaps a party or a circus. Draw some of the images you can remember in a curved, twisted way, and use lots of bright colors. Modern art, Miró. Mark Grady, age 10. Artist profile, artist biography. Grant Wood, 1891, born on a farm near Anamalsa, Iowa. 1901, at age 10, left the farm with his mother after his father's death and moved to Cedar Rapids. 1913, enrolled in the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. 1914, at age 23, joined the Army during World War I and painted camouflage on tanks and canyons. 1920, made the first of several trips to Europe to study impressionism and pastimism art. 1930, painted the most famous work, American Gothic. 1934, age 43, appointed assistant professor of fine art at University of Iowa. 1942, died of liver cancer in Iowa City. Artist influences, Northern Masters, inspired by the realism of Netherlands Masters, portrait of a man, see 1485 detail above. Grant Wood, all the good ideas I've ever had came to me while I was milking a cow. American Gothic, 1930, 29.25 times 24.5 inches, 74.3 times 62.4 centimeters. Oil on beaver board, compressed wood pulp used for construction. Modern art. Wood. Grant Wood was a painter from the American Midwest who captured the ordinary people and scenes he grew up with. While abstract and other kinds of modern art were fashionable in Europe, Wood's truthful style was simple, country subject matter offered a complete contrast. His style became known as regionalism, pointed in the medieval Gothic architectural style. This arched window inspired the paintings named. Some experts think Wood deliberately used repeated patterns of 3 lines or shapes in his pictures. This window has 3 parts. Can you find any other 3s? Clue: look at the pitchfork, the man's overalls, and the deep wrinkles below his glasses. American symbol, possibly the most familiar American painting of all time. American Gothic was inspired by a house with an unusual window above. The Wood added, the kind of people I fastened should live in that house. The woman who posed for him was his sister Nana, and the man was a dentist. Do you think this couple was our husband and wife, or father and daughter? Are they grumpy and rigid, or dignified and serious? Life on the prairies. In the winter of 1932 to 1933, the U.S.'s economy was at the lowest point of the Great Depression, which had begun in 1929 when the stock market crashed. Many people were unemployed, and agriculture, mining, and other industries in America were struggling. Wood painted hopeful pictures showing good times. Dinner for Threshers shows a scene from the 19th century when there was no machinery and agriculture was thriving. During the early 1930s, American farmlands became a dry dust bowl, yet Wood portrayed these fields as a fertile, appealing, rounded landscape. People are drawn to Wood's pictures because they are warm and friendly. Stone City, Iowa, 1930, oil on panel. Dinner for Threshers, 1934, oil on hardboard. The farmhouse in the picture is still standing in Eldon, Iowa. Modern art. Wood. Gallery. Animals in art. Animals have featured in art since the first markings on cave walls thousands of years ago. The varied styles of art have shown different aspects of animals, from adored pets to powerful beasts to incarnations of spiritual gods. Development the 2nd, 1939. M.C. Escher, woodcut, printed from 30 blocks. Many of Escher's work use repeated titled patterns called tessellations. In this picture, he was thinking about infinity, gradually reducing the reptiles into tiny hexagons. Seeing things. For more on African sculpture, see page 112. Horse and Train. 1954, Alex Colville glazed oil on hardboard. Inspired by a World War I poem, Colville wanted to show that although a situation may seem hopeless, choices can be made. Will the train stop, or the horse leave the tracks to avoid a collision? Women on horseback. Late 18th century, King Hong-do, ink and light color on paper. King Hong-do was a great Korean court painter of the late 18th century who painted the daily activities of people. Buffalo mask. Bamilk tribe wood in Cameroon masks were worn at tribal ceremonies. Buffaloes were considered powerful and brave, and these masks was glaring almond-shaped eyes and large teeth and nostrils symbolized the power of the chief. Numerous Char, 2008. Kenko Ashkev, stone cut and stencil. Born in an igloo in 1927, the Canadian artist Ashkev combined her native tradition, Inuit culture, with Western art styles in her work. Tiger in a tropical storm. Surprise, 1891. Henri Rousseau, oil on canvas. The self-taught French artist Rousseau painted wild animals in jungle landscape based on his visits to the botanical gardens in Paris. Horses, 1950. Xu Belhong, Chinese ink and color on paper. The Chinese artist Xu Belhong was known for his horse paintings. His ink work captured the spirited movement of the shapes. A monkey, 1500s. Albert Durer, watercolor and gorgeous on paper. The Renaissance painter and engraver Albert Durer was fascinated by animals and was one of the first artists to show animals as subjects on their own. Blue Fox, 1911. Franz Marie, oil on canvas. The expressionist painter Franz Marc painted his animals in symbolic colors to convey their spiritual nature. He used blue for his masculinity, yellow for joy and happiness, and red for motherhood. For Marc, blue was the most deeply spiritual primary color. Puppy. 1992. Jeff Koons, stainless steel. Soil, gold textile, fabric flowering paints. This 43-foot, 112.4 meters high sculpture of a West Highland white terrier puppy now stands outside the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. The steel structure is covered in a variety of living flowers with an inner watering system. Art style, post-war abstract art. In the 20th century, a new style was created where artists made up their own shapes and colors to express their emotions. In these abstract paintings, people, places, or objects were unrecognizable. This new style was used in artists in many different movements after World War II. 1939 to 1945, artists used abstract art to convey their innermost feelings. How did it happen? 19th century, Impressionist Edgar Degas. Movements of the 19th century, Impressionism, Neo-Impressionism, and Post-Impressionism stressed the importance of the creative process as well as the subject. 20th century, Expressionism, Edward and Munch. Movements of the early 20th century, Symbolism, Fascism, and Expressionism used color to express strong personal emotions. Supermism, Construction, 1910, oil on board. Malevich's Surrealism art has been described as hard-edged and minimal. To him, a square represented the spiritual perfection. Impressionism, 1910, oil on canvas. Kandinsky is considered the founder of abstract art. Having founded the movement in the 1920s, he was inspired after seeing the upside-down painting and liked the shapes and colors. Wassily Kandinsky, 1866 to 1944. Composition with red, blue, and yellow, 1930, oil on canvas. Monreal's art used geometric shapes. To him, these shapes freed him from the subject so he could achieve a spiritual state. Surrealism, Salvador Dali, 1930s. Surrealists during the 1930s painted in a dreamlike state to reveal unconscious feelings. 1940s society. Post-war society of the late 1940s was beginning entertained by the new technology of the radio, movies, and television. Abstract artists wanted to also find new ways of painting. Then post-war abstract artists went in different directions. Modern art, post-war abstract art. Color fields. Helen Frank Thaler, Great Meadows, 1951. Frankler devised a soak stain technique using very diluted oil and acrylic paint so the painting would have no brushstrokes or surface texture. Mark Rothko, Untitled, 1960-1961. Rothko often conveyed quiet, thoughtful emotion through large spaces of a single color. His huge canvases convey a feeling of isolation in a world with no end. Linza Zerald, poster stencil, play the 41st. Chemingas, Poor Art Abstract, 1952. Zayt was a Turkish princess who combined abstract art with inspiration from Islamic and Byzantine art. She described herself as painting in a trance, losing herself within the painting. Action. William de Kooning, Door to the River, 1960. Door to the River, 1960. De Kooning and Jackson Pollock, see page 88, were called auction painters. For them, the act of painting becomes the subject of the work, revealing their dramatic emotions. Franz Kleen, New York, 1953. Kleen started out as a realistic painter, but then for a while in the late 1940s and 1950s painted large, abstract black and white cathographic paintings of his observations. Paul Emile Bourgeois, Autumn Reputation, 1953. The radical Canadian abstract painter Bourgeois tried to paint automatically without any thought beforehand of what he was going to do. Geometric. Maria Helena Verdia da Silva Escoch Exemat, 1949. The paintings of the Portuguese abstract artist Maria da Silva was full of detail and complex shapes and forms to convey her search for the never-ending truth. Alfredo Volpi, Fraccato in blue, white, and pink, 1950. Volpi taught himself to paint. He is famous for painting abstracts of the colorful small flags from Brazilian folklore used in annual June festival. Omar Rayo, Mateo's Toy, 2009. Rayo is a Colombian geographic artist famous for his abstract geometric paintings. He uses squares, rectangles, and zigzags in black, white, and sometimes red colors. Artist profile. Jackson Pollock, 1912. Born in Cody, Wyoming, and grew up in Arizona and California. 1930. At age 18, moved to New York City to study art with the mural painter Thomas Hart Benton. 1936. Worked with Mexican muralist and was introduced to the FX paint being poured at an experimental workshop. 1945. Married the painter Lee Croners, 1942 to 1952. During this time, created his most famous dirt paintings. 1956. At the age of 44, died in a car accident. Artist influences. Native Indian sand and painting inspired by the way different colored sands were tricked to form symbolic images. Number 1. Jackson Pollock. When I am in my painting, I have a general notion of what I'm doing. Jackson Pollock is a famous abstract expressionist painter because he created a whole new way of painting. In 1947, he suddenly stopped standing at easels and used palettes and brushes and started dripping household paints over huge canvases on the floor. Nobody had painted like this before. The artist's way of working with paint and canvases was made the subject of the painting These auction paintings became very popular. Number one, 1948, 5 feet and 8 inches times 8 feet 8 inches, 172.7 times 264.2 centimeters. Drip and splash. Paul Locke created the drip paintings by nailing a large canvas to the floor and then moving around a while pouring, dripping, and flinging paint. These movements were energetic and emotional, yet controlled. The paintings have no main focus, and all parts of the picture are equally important. Paul Locke's signature became part of the pictures. His name would be created by dripping paint, and he would also use his hands to mark the canvases. Can you find these in the paintings above? Artist profile, artist biography. Sir Sidney Nolan, 1917, born in Melbourne, Australia. 1933, at age 16, started working in a commercial art company. 1934, attended night school at the National Gallery of Victoria Art School of Melbourne. 1941 to 1945, at age 25, drafted into the Australian Army but went absent without leave. 1945, traveled through Ned Kelly country and started painting the first Ned Kelly series. 1950 to 1951, traveled to Europe and settled in the United Kingdom. 1984, King habited for his services to art. 1992, died in London, United Kingdom. Artist influence, Central Australia, inspired by the brilliant light. Henry Rossum, inspired by native art and children's art. Sir Sidney Nolan. Sir Sidney Nolan was an imaginative and expressive painter and one of the most famous Australian artists. In his paintings, he captured the bright light of rugged Australian bush, using this as the setting for some of the most dramatic stories about Australian heroes. The life of Ned Kelly, a famous 19th century outlaw, inspired Nolan to make several series of paintings. Death of Constable Scowley, 1946, 35.5 times 47.75 inches, 90.4 times 121.2 centimeters, and malleable on composition board. The desire to paint the landscape involves a wish to hear more of the stories that take place in the landscape. Modernite. Nolan worked quickly, sometimes squeezing the paint straight from the tube and onto the canvas. He had his own style, often painting people, trees, and animals in a simplified way and using colors that best recreated the Australian landscape. Ned Kelly can be recognized in Nolan's paintings by the distinctive black helmet and homemade armor. Kelly and his gang wore his armor in their gunfights with police. Kelly's armor was made from parts of plows, pieces of leather, and iron bolts. The Ned Kelly series. Ned Kelly was a bushranger who became a folk hero for his daring to stand against the police. In 1878, as outlaws, he and his gang killed some police, including Constable Scowley, at their camp at Sterry Bark Creek. In 1945, Nolan began his series of paintings about the events of Ned Kelly's life and returned to his subject again and again. Nolan considered himself to be an outlaw since he had deserted from the army, and he often painted on the themes of betrayal and injustice. Glen Warren, 1955, Republican on board. Glen Warren was the village where Kelly and his gang took their last stand. Police surrounded the inn where they had taken hostages, and at dawn, Kelly came out wearing his armor and marched toward the police, firing his gun. The trial, 1947. Emmanuel on board. Kelly was wounded in the legs since his armor did not cover them, and taken to Melbourne to be tried for murder. He was found guilty and hanged at Old Melbourne Jail in 1880. Gallery. Seeing things. For more on for more on pop art, see page 94. Wham! 1963. Rodi Lichtenstein, artistic on and oil on canvas. Lichtenstein is famous for his cartoon-like art style. A fighter aircraft shoots a rocket at the enemy, and the word wham adds to the drama, the impact. War in art. War is shown in different ways in art. Some artists paint the exact details, others portray the pain and suffering, while others focus on the action, such as Lichtenstein's Wham. Will a painting glamorize the heroes or make the viewer face the brutal reality? The Triumph of War. 1966. Renato Granacci, oil on canvas. Granacci was friends with Pablo Picasso and has included the horses from Picasso's paintings. Guataro, see page 72 in his painting. Paths of Glory, 1917. Christopher Richard Wayne Nevinson, oil on canvas. Nevinson worked as a Red Cross ambulance driver at the start of World War I and afterward painted what he had seen at the front lines in France. Old Couple, 1932. Kath Kollwitz, pencil on paper. Many of Kollwitz's drawings show the suffering and grief of the people living in the very poor areas of Berlin and Germany during and after World War I. Barricade in the Rue de la Morterie, June 1848. Memory of Civil War, 1849. Ernest Messor, oil on canvas. Messor was known for his realistic observation in his art. In his painting, he shows the dead bodies of the workers who were rotting in Paris. In Paris in June 1948. Allergetic of War, 1690 to 1700. Luca Giordano, oil on canvas. The 17th century Italian painter Giordano was admired for many religious and mythical paintings. Even in his paintings about war, a mythical god, possibly Vulcan, the Roman god who made armor and weapons in his forge, can be seen. The Kiska Patrol, 1945. E.J. Hughes, oil on canvas. Hughes works as an official war artist between 1940 and 1946 for his country, Canada. This painting shows the Canadian soldiers patrolling the icy mountainous islands of Kiska in 1943. World War II pilot scramble detail unveils 2005. Paul Day bronze created for a monument about the Battle of Britain of World War II. Scramble was the signal for action. Modern art, war and art. Artist profile, artist biography. Andy Warhol, 1928, born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the son of Slovakian immigrants. 1945, at age 17, studied commercial art at the Carrots Institute of Technology. 1949, moved to New York and began a successful career in magazine illustration. 1956, at age 28, first group show at the Museum of Art. 1962, founded his studio called The Factory and gathered a group of economic followers. 1962, developed the technique of silk screening images directly onto canvas. 1968, Shu and Bradley, injured by a disgruntled member of the factory. 1987, at age 59, died after complications from a routine operation. Artist influences. Byzantine iconics influenced by the gold and scandalousness of the images which he saw as a child of his Roman Catholic Church. Andy Warhol. Being good in business is art. Being good in business is the most fascinating kind of art. Andy Warhol was the most famous artist of the pop art movement in the US, which used images taken from the mass media, such as advertising and television. His best work was done in the 1960s when, among other things, he created portraits of movie stars. These explored the glamour of fame and beauty and the passing of time. Warhol challenged existing ideas about what is art and blurred the lines between fine art and popular culture. Marlin, 1967, 36 times 36 inches, 1991.5 times 91.5 centimeters screen print. Movie stars in print. Everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Marilyn Monroe was a very famous Hollywood movie star from the late 1940s to the early 1960s. She became an icon of beauty and glamour. However, she had emotional problems. She had emotional problems. She had emotional problems in the early 1960s. She became an icon of beauty and glamour. However, she had emotional problems and died of a sleeping pill overdose on August 4th, 1962. After Marilyn Monroe died, Warhol used a movie publicity photography to the early 1960s. She became an icon of beauty and glamour. However, she had bad emotional problems and died of a sleeping pill overdose on August 4th, 1962. After Marilyn Monroe died, Warhol used a movie publicity photograph of her and made more than 20 silkscreen paintings of the image. Warhol used the bright colors used in advertising and made each print slightly different. The simplified image staring out of the picture, just like a business icon, shows no nonsense of the real person, but only the fame and glamour. Warhol used the same technique for painting other celebrities such as Elvis Presley and Lisa Minnelli. Marlin, 1967 screen prints. Warhol at work. Warhol calls his studio the factory because he was mass producing his pictures. However, unlike the machine advertisements, everything on was printed by hand, making them unique. Now you try. Try and create your own picture in the style of Warhol. Take a digital photograph of yourself on a computer. After the photograph, by changing the settings, lighting, colors, and filters to create a number of eye-catching images, print them out. Founded in 1869, Campbell Soup is a brand recognizable around the world. Pop art. Inspired by advertisement, packaging, and images from the television and the movies, Warhol chose very familiar objects and celebrities as the subjects for his art. He used advertising images such as soup can, soda bottles, and boxes of cleaning products, and repeated them just as if they had been mass-produced. Campbell's Soup 1, Tomato, 1961, screen print. Modern art, Warhol. Art style, street art. Displaying a work of art in a public place allows an artist to reach a very wide audience. Many more people will see it than would see a painting in a gallery, but because street artists often paint their pieces on walls and buildings illegally, the type of art is often controversial. Some people see it as valuable art, others as simply vandalism. What do you think? Walls of Wonder. Banksy is the most famous British street artist, but he keeps his identity a closely guarded secret. His witty and subversive works have appeared overnight in cities around the world. Patrice van Elten painted his colorful house in Amsterdam, Netherlands in 1999. The mural called the Rainbow Serpent is found on Superen Street, which has many painted houses, making their mark. Most street artists create their pieces with artificial spray paint on marker pens. Some, such as Banksy, use a stencil to help produce the image quickly, which is important if the artist does not want to be caught. Miracle Reservoir, DAIM, is a 3D graffiti artist from Germany who specializes in making his artwork appear to float above the surface of the wall. He is internationally sought after to paint street after around the world. This piece is called Art de Love on the Scout and was spray painted into a wall by Campbell Wall K3 Hamburg, Germany in April 2005. Katie Heering was an American artist who became famous for